And without further ado, I'd like to bring on Stephen to tell you all about what's happening at Offchain Labs and Arbitrum. Please give him a big round of applause. Welcome back, Stephen.
Great to be here. Thank you.
There's a bunch of things I want to talk about and kind of get your perspective on, especially as kind of how things are going in the Arbitrum ecosystem. But the thing I want to start off with is understanding a big item that kind of took over the news cycle a few weeks ago, which was Robinhood announcing their chain and especially building on Arbitrum. I'm kind of curious to know, from your perspective, how did that conversation happen? How did they sort of land on this decision? What were the things that we're trying to figure out or concerned about? And just the story from your side.
Absolutely. So that conversation actually happened, over the course of literally years. In fact, you saw the very earliest public manifestation of that at ETH Denver, 2 ETH Denvers prior, where we did the first announcement with Robinhood. It was a more limited scope partnership, but ultimately, I think as certainly for builders in the room, people that are building these relationships, often like the best things take a lot of time, right? You don't start off and go like all the way in. Teams need to build trust and relationships. So a lot of that was just, getting to know the team literally over the course of many years. But, going deeper into what their plans were and why ultimately they went the way they did, I think it came down to a few different things. Number one is, and, not to undersell ourselves, but the truth is, Ethereum is a very important part of it. I think enterprises today, and particularly Robinhood, are understanding the importance of being in the Ethereum ecosystem from a decentralization standpoint, from a narrative standpoint as well. And it's just an important and really the best ecosystem to be in if you're building anything institutional. And Arbitrum is a very strong path to build in the Ethereum ecosystem. But going a bit deeper into, I think, the things that are important about them and the things that uniquely Arbitrum could provide. Number one is the Arbitrum ecosystem is unique because we have in the ecosystem a top 5 blockchain called Arbitrum 1 with deep liquidity and a very, very mature DeFi ecosystem, which is fantastic for them to be able to tap into, but also a top chain stack in Arbitrum Orbit. And this is a very unique combination in that you have this incredibly neutral chain that's really liquid and highly performant and very well adopted, and also this stack. And because you mentioned the chain, but in their case, actually, when they did this June 30th announcement, they announced first that they're launching their equities on Arbitrum 1. And the truth is, to launch a chain out of stealth and just come out of the gate and say, hey, we have a chain, is basically not possible. You need months-long cycles with like different infrastructure providers, and just like there's so many.
Big checklist of
Yeah, so many, and like the secret's very hard to keep because you have to get so many people involved. But they really had this June 30th date that they wanted to come out and launch something, and they needed to hit that date. But they also obviously the chain wouldn't be possible at that time, and the Arbitrum ecosystem uniquely was able to provide them the ability to launch an Arbitrum 1 and then use the exact same technology stack, so they can know that everything they're building would continue to work when they extend into their own Arbitrum chain as well. The other thing that's uniquely Arbitrum that is very appealing to them is Stylus. Stylus gives you the ability to write smart contracts in Arbitrum chains, not just in EVM languages like Solidity, although you get that as well, of course, but also in traditional programming languages like Rust and C and C++. And as we move more into an institutional world, that's going to be, in my opinion, more and more appealing because the developers, both the legacy code base they have and the others that may want to build alongside them, ultimately, will likely have a lot of experience in these other languages. And the other point that I'll mention, and this is something that Vlad has said a few times, in particular of why it makes sense for them to launch their own chain. I'm not actually, so there are some people out there that will say, everyone needs to launch their own chain, and there are some out there that will say nobody needs to launch their own chain. One of the nice things of us having both a top chain and also a top chain stack in the ecosystem is really not opinionated about that. I want people to build in the Arbitrum ecosystem. For some people, it makes sense to have a chain. For other people, I think it doesn't make sense. But in the case of Robinhood, why I think it makes so much sense is they're not like looking to a chain to say, okay, who are the users in this chain? We'll try to pick up those users. It's the opposite. They have a product, and they have, all of these users that will actually follow them and their decisions. So, their users are coming to crypto not via Arbitrum or Ethereum or Solana. They're coming to crypto via the Robinhood app, and they're going to go exactly where they tell them to be. And if you think about, operating a business model and why actually running an L2 makes so much sense, is because you get to basically, not be a tenant, but actually be, the landlord of that chain, right? So for all the activity they're driving to their chain, if they went to a public chain, they'd have to pay fees for users or pass those on to users, but also all the ancillary activity, right? Maybe some other app is say, hey, we're going to build on this chain because we want to be, co-located with Robinhood and their equities, or maybe there's a wallet product that succeeds. All that ancillary activity, goes to someone else. It's like you have a hotel room, but someone else that's also coming because they want to be, go on vacation with you, you're not sort of benefiting off of that. But if you're actually driving your own users and other users to the chain as well, then it makes a lot more sense to turn your operating expenses into actually revenue as well. So I think for them, particularly because they have a strong user base, it made a lot of sense for them to launch their own chain, and ultimately Arbitrum, with the flexibility of the Orbit stack, Stylus, and also this dual ability to both launch immediately in Arbitrum 1 and expand onto your own blockchain, it was the right solution for them.
I mean, that's awesome. And thanks for that kind of backstory and the insight. I mean, this is a multi-year process would not have been my guess. It was like maybe 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 2025 altogether. So I guess the follow-up question I have is that Robin is just the one that in a way made the biggest splash, but they're not the only ones. And you've kind of done this with a few other big companies. And maybe the similar question there is like, was it the same timeline for all of them, or was it just the first one was the hardest, and then immediately everything else just became simple, quick, and easier?
So it's actually interesting. If you look at the Arbitrum Orbit stack, we actually started off, I would say, a bit behind. Others had, earlier adoption before us. If you go back, to about a year and a half ago, January, previous January of 2024, there were no Orbit chains. The first one was a chain called Zai, a gaming chain, very very strong chain as well, and that was the first Orbit chain. And we were a bit late to the game, but then we had, because the nice thing about the Orbit stack is it has this customizability, so you can use your own gas token, you can add privacy, you have chains like Plume and Kinto that are doing institutional things. Really, like, you have Ape Chain that's building a cultural community for NFT holders and collectors. There's so many different things that you can do with the technology. So we saw a lot of different developers coming and choosing the Arbitrum stack. In the first year, there were, today there are over 100 chains building on the Arbitrum stack. But we had, to be honest, no massive institutional names in the first year. It was a very long tail of extremely strong projects, but mostly crypto native projects. So, and those are, I guess, a little bit faster in terms of their business cycle, because they don't. It's not like you have something else to risk or lose. It's like,
Or an approval process.
exactly. So yes, you're sort of in the space, and it makes a lot of sense. I think one of the place where we were, to be honest, a little slower and behind was in terms of these big names, institutional brand chains. I think this year we've definitely done a good job in adding that to the offering as well. So we mentioned Robinhood. Another big one is Converge, which is the chain with Securitize and Athena. And this is going to be a continued theme throughout our focus through the year. Not to say that one is more important than the other, but ultimately, our goal, as we've said many times, is for Arbitrum to be everywhere. And that includes supporting both the crypto native projects as well as, the world's biggest financial institutions.
So as you kind of think about this goal, what does kind of the time allocation look like here? Is everything at a point where the tech is done and you just kind of have to effectively sell it well so that everybody can understand it and make that transition, or do we still have unsolved problems, or just we know that there are still bottlenecks that will hit, and the engineering focus goes to that to enable that world to be true?
So I think we definitely still have lots of unsolved problems. If we look back to where we were a couple of years ago, we've come a very, very long way. The way I think about the space, and actually the role of Offchain Labs, is to solve the hardest problems that are, holding back, worldwide massive adoption. When we founded Offchain Labs back in 2018, that was clearly scaling. And I think, both us and others as a community have done a very good job at addressing the scaling issue. And then what happens is you're not done. I mean, you could be, but the number 2 on the list pops up, and now you have another really, really big problem. And I would say the problem that we have today in our ecosystem, and this is increasingly becoming our focus, and not to say we're done with scaling, because scaling is a cat and mouse game, right? You scale, there's more demand, you scale again, you're never done scaling. But I think we're at a pretty good spot right now. But the bigger problem we have is at least this perception of fragmentation that we have. And I don't really think
Between orbit chains or
just
the L2?
generally.
Okay.
Actually, so it's interesting you ask, and I'll clarify this. And this is something that actually we differ on, I think, from some others in the space that are building chain stacks. I don't believe in inter-orbit interoperability as an end goal, as a priority. It happens to be, for some technical reasons, it's easier, but you as a user probably don't care, you as a user, as a developer, the set of chains you want to interop with is not going to also be the set of chains that I successfully did BD for, right? It's going to be, whatever set of chains you want. It might be a Base and Arbitrum. It might be Solana. You just want to get to wherever you want to go. The analogy I like to give is I have 2 pizza shops in my town, and they hate each other, but I eat at both of them. And that's okay. And I understand that, we might have these deep politics when it comes to the chain stack, but our developers and our users want to interop with every single one of those chains. And my goal is to actually make it easier for I don't want to create a walled garden around orbit chains. If you're a user that wants to go from Arbitrum 1 to Solana, I want to make it as easy as possible for you to get there. And the reason is, if you really want to go there, you're going to get there. But if I add friction, you might not come back. And
so what's the approach here? In a way, every L2 on Ethereum has to solve or simplify bridging. Are you saying that you kind of get to bypass some steps here, or kind of short circuit the existing kind of status quo, or how do you kind of simplify that on the engineering side for Arbitrum?
So I think there are a lot of different solutions that work in different ways. For example, in the Orbit world, if you're building 2 Arbitrum AnyTrust chains, AnyTrust is a data availability solution we offer. It happens to be we have this feature called fast withdrawals that allows you to go back and forth very, very quickly between them. So that's one solution. Just yesterday, we announced our acquisition of ZeroDev, which is a smart wallet provider that also is one of the leaders in chain abstraction, and there are really UX level, wallet level features that you can do as well. Ultimately, I think there are fantastic solutions like Layer 0 and across. I think the piece that we're missing, and this is increasingly becoming our focus, is how do we package these up for users in a way. So for anything you want to do, there's probably a pretty good path to get there today. I think the problem we have is the UX is not presented to users in a way that makes it intuitive for them. You have to know, okay, I want to go from A to B. Oh, let me use a cross for that. Let me use Layer 0 for that. For that, I can use the native bridge. And you just sort of have to be a specialist and an expert in all these things.
You need to know what you need to do, which is not a good assumption.
Exactly, but the user just wants to go and go to the chain, or I just want to buy my NFT in that chain, and I have my funds here. I don't really want to engage even with these technical details. The analogy I like to give is, if you go to YouTube, imagine you go to YouTube and you get this pop-up that says, would you like to watch your video on AWS today or on GCP? And you just be like, I really just want to watch my video. I don't care about your backend service. And maybe it's ironic for me to say that because I'm offering one of those backend services in the space, but really we have to give the user that abstracted experience, that their wallet, and really I think it's at the UX level. I come from a research background, so I'm okay with what I'm about to say because I'm kind of taking a stab at myself here, which is there's a lot in our community. We have a big research team in our company. Ethereum is very research oriented. I think this interop is a deep research problem, and you can get into a room with a blackboard and some smart people. At the end of the day, you'll build this complex protocol and you solved interop. And what I'm here to tell you is you will never solve interop that way. I think it's important, but I would say 90% of the problem is UX and packaging up these things for wallets. And then there's a long tail of things we can get better. But actually, if we stop the research today, there might be some griefing vectors and other risks, the things that we can improve with deep research, but actually it's packaging this up for users, right? There's no reason today that if I'm a user on Arbitrum 1 that holds ARP, and the gas fees in Arbitrum 1 are in ETH, and I want to buy NFT on Ape Chain, and there the gas is in Ape, right? So now what I have to do, I have to exchange my ARB for ETH, bridge to Ape, buy the NFT, maybe bridge the rest of my Ape back, convert it back to ARB, because otherwise I'm going to totally forget that it ever exists. There's no reason why that experience exists. We have all the solutions and we just need the packaging up for users. And I think smart wallets, which is one of the reasons that we acquired ZeroDev, because packaging this all up together for users, and again, in a way that's not even Arbitrum specific, that's can serve any, ZeroDev serves 30 plus chains, and I have no intention of, of removing any. I actually like to expand that.
What does it mean for a chain to acquire, in a way, a dev product? So how do you think about that integration here?
So that's a great question. So to be clear, and I'm glad you asked, Offchain Labs acquired the product. I work at Offchain Labs. We're a service provider to Arbitrum, but ultimately we're a venture-backed business, and we'll run ZeroDev as it was. But ultimately, I care a lot about the success of Arbitrum as well, and we have a lot of, obviously, say in the development of Arbitrum. And the nice thing is, and we did this so. Just a little history of the company. We started off with Arbitrum as a layer 2. We actually first moved down into layer 1. We acquired Prismatic Labs, and we today built Prism, which is the leading consensus client for Ethereum layer 1. And now we've moved up the stack, and we've acquired ZeroDev, and you'll see us more work from here, both in terms of some M&A activity, but also products that we add. And the goal is, it turns out that if you build these things together, you can do a much, much better job, because if ZeroDev is building by themselves, they can't go ahead and say, they're kind of limited by the exact API that we give them, right? So they can't go to an Arbitrum chain and say, hey, I just need this one hook that's not there. I mean, they can ask us, and we might do it, but ultimately, if you build these things together, you're going to do a better job. We'll still run into that issue because, like I said, we're not just building interoperable Arbitrum chains, but hopefully we'll be able to influence the market there more by building these products together. But to be clear, Offchain Labs is the one that acquired this. Is not owned by the Arbitrum Foundation or the Arbitrum DAO. It was our funds that paid for this deal, and we will ultimately be the ones that continue to develop it.
Amazing. I've been asking this question to a bunch of other speakers today too, and it's, I think, kind of relevant for you as well. What do you think about a lot of these announcements of new layer 1s for stablecoins, and how they're kind of going about sort of going basically from scratch? General thoughts, or pros and cons, or advice to a lot of the others that are about to consider this?
Bearish. I actually don't think it makes much sense for the following reason. If you're building building a new layer 1, first of all, I'm a big believer in decentralization and security, and that's one of the nice things that actually leveraging Ethereum, the most secure blockchain that exists. We have this option, and it makes sense, and you can do that. And we're seeing, not to mention specifics, but we're seeing some of these launch with, less than, I would say, stellar security assumptions or decentralization assumptions, which again, they're forward about it. You understand what you're getting into, but that's ultimately not the way that I'd like the industry to go, right? If we fast forward 5 years and somehow one of these chains became dominant to Ethereum, which I don't think will happen, I think there'll be a big step backwards for our industry, because ultimately, the thing that got me here, I think the thing that got a lot of us here, is the promise of decentralization and security. But actually, if you think about, again, the business model, I don't even understand even from a business model perspective, because people like to say, oh, maybe there's L1 premium. The truth is, depending on the weather outside, there's an L1 premium or L2 premium. The market kind of cycles in between these two. But the truth is, if you're a stablecoin provider or a financial institution that wants to launch a chain, launching an L2 actually is, I would say, a much more financially sound thing to do, because what happens is,
So you're giving a financial sound argument instead of just the time and engineering complexity.
There's that as well, right? You can customize, you can choose which parts of the stack you want to customize, everything exists. But actually, even from the basics, I think, and the reason I'm giving that argument is I think what I've heard is, and this is a big misconception, the argument for it, all those arguments are so obvious that why would you go into this and not launch a layer 2? So what is the argument for it? People think there's some premium, but actually, what happens is, if you're launch a layer 1, you have to pay validators. So you have to not only take all your transaction fees, but typically you have to inflate by 12% or something like that to actually just pay the cost to operating the chain. And by the way, that's true if you have 0 transactions. It doesn't scale with the number of transactions, whereas an L2 gives you a much, much better model, because you have better customizability, you have better security from Ethereum, but also it's a fantastic deal. Some people say it's too good, the deal that Ethereum gives to L2s, where Arbitrum today has about 93% margins, so it pays about 7% of transaction cost to Ethereum. What that means is you can actually retain 93% of the transaction fees for growth, but even more important, it actually scales with you. So if you have fewer transactions, you're not, it's just financially, it makes a lot more
fixed cost kind of capex notion of running your validators.
Exactly. And then there's also all the again, Arbitrum Orbit is the most customizable chain, and you can pinpoint which, what you want to do and where you want to focus, and everything else, Ethereum and the stack just take care for you. So ultimately, I don't really understand why the market, why some are going in that direction. I think it's a mistake.
And maybe that native token goes to $2. You never know.
You never know.
My last question to you before we end this is just overall, I guess, how are you doing? It's been a busy year for everything that's been going on at Offchain and Arbitrum. How are things on your end, and what's been taking up most of your time?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think I'm doing pretty well. It's definitely a very busy time. It's an extremely competitive time, both in our smaller set of industry companies, but also more broadly. But I think the thing that excites me most is we're seeing the vision play out, and the vision that I was probably most excited about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, or a little more now, actually, when I first got into this space, it wasn't, hey, these like new, more fringe experiments that got me excited. It was, hey, how can we actually build and revolutionize the core system, everything that we're building today? How can we revolutionize the financial ecosystem? I think over the time, some people lost this vision a bit, and they kind of viewed crypto as, oh, there's the real thing, and then there's this like toy thing that some of my friends do, and one friend made a lot of money, so you should take a look at that, right? That's like what crypto became to a lot of people. But now we're actually seeing the institutions come back, and the institutions are interested not in like the 2017 private blockchains. They're actually interested in Ethereum and building real things on Ethereum. And I'll close with back to the Robinhood announcement. The coolest thing about that to me, they did a side by side where they showed the US app in their announcement. They showed the US app, which is powered by traditional brokerages, and they showed the new app that they launched in the EU, which is powered by Arbitrum. Their equities on Arbitrum. And the cool thing was that they looked exactly the same. And you didn't have to learn how to, download a wallet and set up a wallet and download a seed phrase in order to actually reap the benefits of using the blockchain. And back to like the YouTube GCP point, that's where we succeed. It's when there will be millions and millions of users using the technology, benefiting from the technology, but don't actually even have to engage with the details. That to me is the most exciting thing. So personally, I could not be more excited for the leap that we've taken as an industry, and I think only more excited for what is to come.
Well, kudos to you and the rest of the team for not only reaching stage 1, but actually helping scale Ethereum. Thank you so much.
Thank you.